I've had the privilege of sitting down with several Eastern Orthodox priests, a Catholic priest, and tons of friends who are both Catholic and Eastern Orthodox to discuss the differences between all of us with our respective streams of Christianity. And the question that often comes up is, Ruslan, why have you not became Eastern Orthodox or Catholic? And let me just forewarn that I love my Eastern Orthodox and Catholic brothers and sisters. Some of you guys may know that I grew up Oriental Orthodox. That's one of the first major schisms within Christendom. And the Oriental Orthodox is the church that encompasses the Armenian Orthodox, the Ethiopian Orthodox, so on and so forth. So I was actually baptized and I was an altar boy, and it was a very conflicting experience in my formidable years of life. But having multiple conversations, both publicly and privately, it has given me much time to reflect. Now, before either side jumps into the comment section without watching the video and starts arguing, let me just say that if I make any mistakes in this, I'll probably get in the comments and try my best to clean it up. But what I do think is interesting in ecumenical conversations is many of the presuppositions that we often grant for opposing sides. And this is what I mean. There are multiple reasons why people evolve into high church settings. And the most common that I hear is this idea of apostolic succession. The idea that the apostles established bishops and priests, and those bishops established other bishops, and the only way to maintain an unbroken chain of apostolic succession is through that line. If we grant this presupposition that there is an unbroken chain of apostolic succession within Eastern Orthodoxy, Catholicism, Oriental Orthodoxy, so on and so forth, then the presupposition allows them to say, and therefore you Protestants have no apostolic succession and no valid church and no valid communion. Now, in a minute, we'll look at what the scriptures say regarding this to the best of my ability. But what I think is interesting is that there really shouldn't be this idea of high church versus low church, because most of these churches with apostolic succession all claim to be the one true church. Some of them are more friendly with other one true churches than others, but generally, they all claim to be the one true Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Now, I'm not trying to argue which one is or isn't, and I'm not even saying that Protestants have the one true and Holy Apostolic Church. We've never made that claim. Just interesting that the debates happening online are high church versus low church, where all high churches are exclusive in their claims to be the one true church. But that's neither here nor there. I enjoyed many of the aspects of growing up Oriental Orthodox. I still go back and visit. I love the incense. I love the liturgy. I think it is beautiful. But this idea of there being apostolic succession through the line of the bishop, and therefore Protestants generally don't have apostolic succession, is a sneaky one. Because there are Protestant streams of Christianity that do claim and show a unbroken apostolic succession, specifically the Anglicans and some Lutherans, specifically the Lutheran Church of Sweden and the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Finland. You can look up different charts for yourself. I'm not going to get into that. I think the deeper issue, though, is granting the presupposition that there are actually three offices within church. Specifically, priest or presbyter, deacon, which we all know about deacons, and bishop, which is often translated as elder or overseer. Now, one of my favorite things as a YouTuber is helping you guys discover other up-and-coming YouTubers. And so we're going to do that in a second with checking out a video from a channel I've been loving called Biblical Understanding. But before we get into that, guys, my name is Ruslan, and this channel exists to encourage, empower, and inspire you to live a life that blesses God. So if you're new here, if you're not new here, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. As a huge percentage of the people that watch this channel, unfortunately, are not subscribed. All right, let's jump back into this video. Now, before we go to the aspects of church history regarding this, and specifically high church folks saying that Protestants run from Ignatius because of his views of the three offices within church, let's first go to the scriptures and see if there's three offices or if there's perhaps something more happening. Now, again, as a Protestant, remember that we hold to sola scriptura. That doesn't mean you have to. It just means that from our framework, scripture is the only apostolic authority that is infallible. That doesn't mean we don't hold to other authorities. It doesn't mean we don't like the creeds. It just means that when it comes to an infallible authority, we believe scripture is the only one. And when we go to the scriptures, we see two passages specifically about overseers or elders. The first one is in Titus chapter 1, and the other one is in 1 Timothy chapter 3. Now, if we go here, this is Paul writing Titus, and he says, "The reason I left you in Crete was that you might put in order what was left unfinished and appoint elders in every town as I directed you. An elder must be blameless, faithful to his wife, a man whose children believe and are not open to the charge of being wild and disobedient. Since an overseer manages God's household, he must be blameless, not overbearing. So here are the standards that we see Paul saying that an elder must have. Now, I love using my Logos Bible software. If you guys didn't know, they're a partner of the channel, and they're giving all of us 60 free days of Logos Bible software. If you go to logos.com/Ruslan or hit the link in the pinned comment. I use this every single day. And one of the things I love about it is that we can go to the original language. So right here, if we look at this word elder, I can hit study, and we see the word elder here is presbyteros, or priest. That's where the word priest comes from. This is someone that is an elder, someone that is older, someone that is in the Sanhedrin context, according to this, right? One of the translations for it apparently is old men, or someone that is older. Now, here, Paul is using the word elders. He's writing in Titus that to appoint elders. Now, a little later, he says, since an overseer manages his household, he must be blameless, not overbearing, not quick-tempered, not given to drunkenness, not violent, not pursuing dishonest gain. So this word overseer, we hit here. Aha! And now we have our other word.
Episkopos.
Episkopos. Episkopos is the word bishop. Do you see something interesting here? Okay. Before I reveal that, let's go to the other parallel version of this passage. Same thing. We see 1 Timothy 3. Here's a trustworthy saying, whoever aspires to be an overseer, what is overseer in this context? It is, again, a episkopos. Episcope, which is a bishop. That is the 1 Timothy layout of the qualifications for an overseer and for a deacon, right? And that word overseer keeps being used. So the interesting thing is, if we go back to Titus, the word elder is the presbyter. The word overseer is the word bishop. Now, it would seem, and Protestants hold to, that Paul is using the word presbyter and the word bishop interchangeably. So in Titus, when Paul's laying out these standards and expectations, the word elder is presbyteros, and we see it used in the New Testament several times. And this is how it's usually translated: elders, old men, ancients, some elders, and eldermen, to your elders. So the word elder, which is overseer or bishop, and the word presbyter is used interchangeably. And when we look at that word bishop,
episkopos,
scroll down, we see it used twice. 1 Timothy 3:2, Acts 20:28. Paul gathers and calls together the overseers or the bishops. So I am not saying that there aren't three offices: bishop, priest, deacon. I'm saying that if we're looking at the scriptures, you should be able to see, if you're a high church person, how many Protestants come to the conclusion that there's only two offices: elder, overseer, priest, bishop being one, and then deacon being two. That does something to the idea of apostolic succession. But we're going to get there in a second. Now, some of you will say, Ruslan, great, but don't you know that church tradition says the opposite, that there's actually three offices, as pointed out by Ignatius? Well, that's where I want to highlight Biblical Understanding's YouTube channel. And he put together a fabulous 21-minute video on this, which you should go check out, about Ignatius and his writings regarding the three offices and how that is the one that low church Protestants are terrified of. So Ignatius is an apostolic father, different than a church father. Those guys wrote later on. Ignatius wrote between the year 107 to 110. And he is who people point to with regards to this idea of three offices. But Clement actually came a little bit before him. He wrote around the year 95 or 96. This is also an apostolic father. And so this is how we get to our first clip from Biblical Understanding, where he is harmonizing Ignatius with the idea of what Clement and other apostolic fathers wrote with regards to two offices or three offices. Now, at the end, I'll help you understand why that makes a difference for apostolic succession within Protestant streams of Christianity. But first, let's check out Biblical Understanding and his breakdown of some of these church fathers.
However, when we compare Ignatius to the rest of the writings that we have from the Apostolic Fathers time period, we discover that Ignatius is the only individual who holds to this three-office view of the church. I've already done a video on Clement of Rome, and we've examined in that video that he held to a two-office structure of church government.
So 1 Clement 42:4-5 writes, "Therefore, preaching among regions and cities, they appointed their first fruits, testing them by the Spirit to be bishops and deacons." So again, it would seem that Clement, an apostolic father who's writing very early, is seeing bishops as both presbyters and overseers, bishops, right? One office. of future believers, and this is nothing new. For much time since then has been written about bishops and deacons. For somewhere the scripture says as follow, I will appoint their bishops in righteousness and their deacons in faith. Interesting.
The same goes for Polycarp in his letter to the Philippians, and we also see this referenced in the Didache and the Shepherd of Hermas.
So Polycarp was also an apostolic father who wrote around the year 120 AD, so after Clement and Ignatius. The Shepherd of Hermas could have been written anywhere from 70 AD, which is very early, to 140 AD. And it was actually in the running for becoming a part of the canon scriptures, like in the Murturian canon, which actually had the Shepherd of Hermas. And then he referenced the Didache, which we've covered on this channel. That was written in the late 1st century or the early 2nd century. So all around the same time as Ignatius.
And so I think really this whole discussion boils down to this main question. And this really is the question that kind of determines where we go from here. Do we interpret Ignatius in light of the rest of the apostolic fathers, or do we interpret the rest of the apostolic fathers in light of Ignatius? My contention is that we should use the rest of the apostolic fathers to interpret Ignatius for a few reasons. The first is because Ignatius is, again, the only individual who has this distinctive three-office view. It would be one thing if Ignatius was accompanied by a few other contemporaries and they were a small minority to the rest of the apostolic father witness. But given the fact that he is the only individual from this time period that holds to the three-office view, I believe it is more reasonable to use the collective witness as a way to interpret what Ignatius is saying.
Now, again, what I'm not saying is that there aren't church fathers that came along later that hold to this three-office view. But what it seems like is the apostolic fathers, more or less the disciples of the apostles, seem to all have held to a two-office view. One of overseer and priest, or in our context today, probably be like a senior pastor and pastor role, and that of deacon, like an under pastor role, right? And the interesting thing about deacons, by the way, is that there were women deacons in the Bible, which none of the high churches today generally ordain women deacons unless they're like completely gone woke or whatever. Someone will correct me about that in the comment section, I guarantee it. So then, where did the idea of the three offices come from? Well, it seems like Jerome is writing about it and is explaining why this was necessary. Now, I really want you guys to go watch his entire video, but listen to how he quotes Jerome, who seems to give an explanation on how we got to this idea of three offices. Jerome is writing a couple hundred years after Ignatius and Polycarp and all these guys, and listen to his explanation.
As is well known, in his commentary on Titus chapter 1 verse 5, Jerome states that in the early church during the 1st century, the office of presbyter, which is indicated by the term priest here, was the same office as a bishop, and that the churches were governed by a common council of presbyters. That was until there existed men who were slanderers and began to break apart the church and cause schisms because of their errors. When this happened, it was decreed for the whole world that one of the presbyters, priests, should be elected to preside over the others. Later on in this commentary, he doubles down on this understanding by saying that presbyters were the same as bishops, initially speaking, but gradually, as dissensions were eradicated, all solicitude was conferred on one man. Jerome's understanding of the development of the three-office view fits beautifully with the primary reason why Ignatius writes his letters in the first place. The primary reason why Ignatius writes his letters is because he is concerned about the unity of the church. He is afraid that heretics and schismatics are going to infiltrate the church, causing schisms and breaking the unity of the church. So it makes sense why Jerome states that the church started with a strict two-office view, as is found in the New Testament and Clement of Rome, among others, but that as time went on and people began to cause schisms in the church, one of those presbyters was elected above the rest to serve as a symbol of unity. In another one of his letters, in letter 146, Jerome compares this process of presbyters appointing a bishop to preside over them as soldiers appointing a general to preside over them as they head into battle.
Another way to possibly look at it is that as time went on and there became divisions, they wanted to elect a first among equals, if you will. If you look at how Eastern Orthodox believe the papacy developed, was that, yes, the Bishop of Rome was kind of a first among equals initially, and then over time, that office became more and more and more powerful. So I'm not saying that this invalidates any other church. Remember, as a Protestant, I believe other churches are valid churches. I believe they have valid communions, but they don't believe the same about us. Now, consider this for a second. If there's only one office, specifically elder, overseer, presbyter, priest, one office, and then deacons. And then the third office came out of a necessity to create a unification and have a first among equals to settle different matters and keep out schismatics. Then the idea that apostolic succession only being passed down through bishops is not really as significant for the Protestant, because Martin Luther, the leader of the Protestant Reformation, and there was other reformers as well, he was a priest. So if Luther was a priest, and remember, in our context, a priest, an overseer, an elder, bishop, all interchangeable, then that means that there is an apostolic succession that goes through Luther to the different streams of Christianity, specifically Protestants. So in my circles, no one just self-appoints themselves as a bishop or as a priest or pastor, any of those sorts of things. There is a laying of hands that happens by other overseers and elders, and then that person is ordained as a lead pastor / overseer elder. So when I had the beautiful privilege of sitting down with Father Josiah at dinner, and he was saying that he had no bishop, I looked at him and said, I do have a bishop. My pastor, my elder overseer, Pastor Jeff Morris of Rhythm Church, is my bishop. That we see that title as interchangeable. That might sound very scandalous to those of you guys who are of high church, but I just want you to understand how some of us come to these conclusions. And by the way, biblical understanding, he's a Presbyterian, so he also holds to this, so we have probably some theological things we disagree on. And he says this in his video, that even if we were to concede there being a three-office view of leadership in the church, that still doesn't prove that Eastern Orthodoxy or Catholicism is true, because Anglicans have apostolic succession. And so if I were convinced that there has to be a bishop that's outside of my elder overseer, which I'm not, I would just become Anglican. Shout out Glenn Scrivener. So anyway, I'm not making this video to pick a fight. I really don't want to, and I'm not going to go back and forth in the comments with you guys, nor do I want to be some sort of Protestant apologist. This is just something that comes up. Ruslan, why are you not Orthodox? Why are you not Catholic? And again, I love my Orthodox folks. I love my Catholic folks. Unlike your view towards us Protestants, we believe you have a valid church and a valid communion. And maybe if you are unsure about how we land at our conclusions, this video will at least let you know that there has been scholarship and work and study on this, and guys way smarter than me who have tackled these issues. And I am not claiming to be a scholar or an expert here. I'm just trying to help my viewers synthesize how I came to these conclusions and why I remain in the type of church that I remain in. So if you want to see my conversation with Father Hares, check that out over here. He's an Eastern Orthodox priest. If you want to see my conversation with Father Simon, he is a Catholic priest. Love both of them. I think they're both awesome. But I remain unpersuaded. And if you want to get that free 60-day trial of Logos Bible software, be sure to check that out over here, or hit the pinned comment below so that you can get your free trial of Logos and study the scripture in deeper understanding, and then jump into the original language to see if you're persuaded or not. All right, I'll see you over there. Peace.